will turn it over to Wendy, and she'll introduce our panelists and tell people how to ask questions.
Submit questions, just like we've been doing every week for quite a while now. If you have a question of the speaker, submit it either via chat or via Q&A, and Phyllis and Ron will be monitoring that and sending your questions to Ruth, who is the Vice President, Director of Legislative Oversight for the Election Integrity Project California. She's also the San Diego, my counterpart in San Diego County, the coordinator for the Election Integrity Project California. She's a retired high school educator and mentor teacher of 34 years. She began working with the election integrity in 2011 as San Diego County coordinator and moved up through the ranks there. She served on the board of EIP from 2012 to 2017, and she's a co-founder of the California version of Election Integrity Project. She also serves as secretary for the nationwide Election Integrity Alliance. Ruth helped create all of that training stuff that you may have seen the last time around, or you'll have the opportunity to see it here in the future. There is so much training that needs to happen here for people that go out and monitor the polls. And Ruth's the one responsible for putting all the training materials together. And I think that she's going to be the one that's doing the Zoom training coming up here with all of the videos, PowerPoints, and whatnot. Ruth does a lot of speaking throughout California. Actually, I have to tell you, I was watching OAN Graham Ledger show one night, and she came on interviewed, and I thought, oh, that's what she looks like. I've been hearing about this lady for so long. She's actually been interviewed by Shannon Bream too on Fox, and she does a lot of radio interviews throughout the state. And speaking of Graham Ledger, he's going to be our speaker on Veterans Day coming up, so you'll get a chance to meet him too. But he is very much into what the Election Integrity Project has been doing, as all of us are, and we're really curious to hear what's going on in terms of vote by mail and what's going to happen with this upcoming election. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Ruth Weiss. Take it away, Ruth.
Thank you, Wendy, and all the rest of you. It's just such a pleasure to be here with you today. And I'm going to share my screen so we can kind of get started. I know that I could talk for 4 hours this morning and still not cover most of everything, but I'm going to try to keep it as short as I can and still cover what I think you would like to know. Right off the bat, I have a question from James, who says that we are fiercely nonpartisan. True the Vote is more Republican. Is that a fair evaluation, and why have we chosen to be nonpartisan? No, it's not really fair. True the Vote is also nonpartisan. Both organizations don't apologize for our worldview. That's different from being partisan. Our worldview is that we are conservative, we are constitutional, we are rule of law and law and order. And we don't apologize for that, but our focus, and also True the Vote's focus, is that elections should be held fairly and honestly, that every single eligible voter should have the opportunity to express their opinion, whatever it is, and that vote should be processed accurately. And so that's why we've chosen to be nonpartisan, because wrongdoing is not limited just to one group of people, and it can affect people. So we want every vote to count if it was cast lawfully. And so that's why we stay nonpartisan, so that we can be legitimate. We're not out there trying to make sure one person or the other gets elected, but that the people's choice gets elected, and that's a little bit different. We're going to talk a little bit about the election and how it's going to change for this time, and a lot of the questions and misconceptions, and whatever I don't anticipate in your questions, please do ask them. Okay, there we go. Okay, we've been working very hard, even with COVID in place, and so we haven't slowed down at all. In fact, we've really ramped things up. I'm going to go through these first slides really fast. I'm not even going to talk about this except this first one. We've gone into the of lawsuits because nobody else was helping us out in that arena. It was never something that we intended to do, but being unable to hold officials accountable any other way, we have to do it. And this first lawsuit is very important. We would appreciate your strong prayers for this. We filed a lawsuit against Ventura County because they were rampant in violating observer rights, which we have by California law, the right to observe. And they have put policies and procedures in place that superseded that law. And basically, if I told you the horror story, you would be astonished. So we filed a lawsuit against them. It was supposed to be heard in March. It didn't get heard in March because of the courts getting shut down for the COVID stuff. So we now have a September date to hear. And the reason I'm covering this lawsuit right now is that this one is going to be instrumental, that however it turns out is going to make a huge for us statewide. Because if Ventura County is slapped down, which they rightfully should be, and told you can't take observer rights away, you have to follow California law, you have to allow these things to occur the way the law says they can occur. If that's the ruling that we get, then that will apply to all 58 counties, because Ventura is not the only one that's trying to play games. Some counties just don't want to be bothered with the riffraff. They don't want the observers there. They just want to, be left alone. And some counties know they've got something to hide, and they don't want observers in there finding out what it is. So this lawsuit and the way it culminates is going to make an enormous difference for not only Ventura County, but other counties who will then be told by the same lawsuit, nope, you can't do that. You got to let him in. You got to let us observe. So please pray for that. I think our new hearing is September the 17th. We'll keep you informed, but please pray for us between now and then, and pray for the judges and everybody that this is going to turn out in our favor, because it really should. We have several other lawsuits you will see on the screen that I would love to do just a whole presentation on what we're doing to hold people accountable in the lawsuits, because it would take a full presentation to do it. We also have a series of potential lawsuits that we'd really like to be able to file that are desperately needed, especially in Los Angeles County. Again, that depends on how we can raise the money to pay the legal fees and to pay the attorneys. So fundraising is very important as far as that's concerned. EIPCA is expanded into Arizona, Nevada, Arkansas. So we have EIP organizations that are LLCs under the umbrella of EIP California. And so that's very exciting. And as Wendy alluded to, we are a founding member of the Election Integrity Alliance, which is a nationwide alliance of organizations similar to ours that are trying to hold officials accountable and get fair and honest elections in their various states. And this alliance is going to help us to share best practices, support one another, and support new groups in states that don't already have groups like ours, so that we can have support nationwide for fair and honest elections. Our website is at the bottom of the page, and you can get to the Election Integrity Alliance through that website and a link if you'd like to check that out and find out more about it. You can also get to the web pages for the Arizona, Nevada, and Arkansas organizations. If you have friends in those states, please let them know. In spite of COVID-19, we have had some success in fundraising. We want to thank you from your county, those of you that have understood our need to have donations. We have had some really good success with getting a couple of grants, as well as some business people who have stepped forward and realized just how threatened their livelihood is right now. And they are trying to help us to make the elections more fair and honest. So we have had some real boon in that direction. You can never get enough, right? But it has at least kept us afloat. If you know of any people in that same situation who might consider supporting us with some pretty deep pocket ways, or any places where we can apply for grant, we love to hear from you. And also, your $5, $10, $15 a month to our coffers is very helpful. So I just wanted to keep that in mind. But the topic for today is, how is COVID-19 going to impact the November elections? And it's going to impact a great deal more than one might assume, simply because all this chaos and falderal nationwide having to do with vote by mail ballots and all that kind of thing. I'm not going to really talk about the governor's executive order, because it was thrown out by the court, and he was told, this is a legislative issue, you can't do it from your executive bench, so this is null and void. But in February, AB 860 was first introduced into the legislature, and it basically was the same exact wording as the governor's executive order. So it's AB 860 that we need to worry about. Many of you were involved in our fight against AB 860, and I want to thank you so much for being there for that. There are three major elements to AB 860. The first one is, every Californian who is eligible to vote in the November 3rd, 2020 election shall receive a vote by mail ballot. I want to clarify this. Everybody is shortening this and saying, oh, okay, this is an all mail ballot election. This is an all vote by mail election. That is not the case. Please don't let anybody say that, because it's a big misconception. as you will see in a minute, you do have, every voter has the right to vote in person. Just because you're receiving a ballot does not obligate you to use that ballot. So even though you're all going to get a ballot, or at least there will be one mailed to you, whether you get it or not is up to the post office and a few other things. But just because you're getting it mailed to your doorstep does not mean you have to use it. And please make sure that everybody you know in any county in California is aware of the difference. Just because it's there doesn't obligate you to use that ballot. Now, we were very concerned about the wording of the executive order and AB 860, because many of you know that there are two voter lists. There's the active and the inactive. People who have been moved to the inactive list have been moved there because, not because they haven't voted, but because we haven't been able to communicate with them, because the mail that is sent to them by the registrar's office comes back undeliverable, because they have not updated their voter registration, and because they have not done anything electoral in a lot of years. We have an awful lot of people in California that got moved to this, as you can see, 0.5 million. The wording of AB 860 originally, as you read, and I'm going to move back to it, says every California who's eligible to vote. Well, everybody on the inactive list is also eligible to vote. Until you get canceled off that list, which federal law requires you have to be there for another 2 election cycles before they can cancel you entirely. While you're there, you're eligible to vote, which makes you vulnerable because you're not even alive yet, or you've moved to another state, which means that somebody else could easily pull you off that list and vote in your name because there's no ID requirements or whatever, California. So it's a vulnerable list. Now, if we mailed a ballot to every eligible Californian, that would include those 4.5 million people, most of whom are dead or long gone out of California, that would have a ballot mailed to their last known address. That would create chaos beyond belief, of ballots out there that went nowhere to nobody. Ballots can't be forwarded. People could scoop them up. They could be used, abused. It would just be nightmare. So what happened was that when we were testifying in the hearing as this bill was going through committee, we knew we weren't going to stop them from mailing ballots out to everybody. That there was no point in fighting that. But we could do is try to fight to make sure that there was wording in the bill that said, we don't mean these 4.5 million people, they can't get a ballot. And so we argued for that, and we suggested an amendment. And one of the benefits of the COVID situation is that because they couldn't hold in-person hearings, they had to allow anybody who wanted to participate in the hearing to come in by phone. And that was a blessing, because now instead of 6 people being in the committee hearing to speak up for our side, we had 900 callers. Many of you were part of those callers who braved a lot of efforts to keep us out of that phone call, by the way, and made it through and persevered. And when I proposed that amendment, then everybody else who called in had the right to give their name, where they were from, and whether they opposed or didn't opposed or supported the bill. And many of those people said, I oppose the bill unless the EIPCa amendment is accepted. And so over and over and over again, they heard that Californians are aware of this little game they were trying to play. And even though the bill right then and there at that meeting was passed without amendment, before it got passed and became law, that amendment was attached to it. You did that, and it's very exciting. If we had not been there and in the numbers that we were to make our point, they would have slipped that by, and then 4.5 million people potentially could have been mailed ballots that should never have gotten a ballot. So I'm going to thank you all for being there and for doing that. If you were part of that process, it was amazing. I know it was a pain in the neck, but you persevered. And this is what self-governance looks like. This is what citizen oversight looks like. You can't just let them get away with whatever they want to get away with. So thank you for that. The second part of this law says that vote by mail ballots now get to be counted even if they've arrived up to 17 days late. I guess they figure mail delays because of COVID or something. We fought this one as well. ridiculous, but the bottom line is 17 days later, a ballot arrives and it has to be counted. Now, the law still says it has to be postmarked by election day, but there are lots of problems with that, including the fact that these are postage paid bulk mail return ballots or return envelopes, which means that generally they don't get postmarked. So one of your jobs in Santa Clara County is to make sure that your registrar has made an arrangement with the Postal Service in your county that they will postmark every ballot returning to the registrar's office. We've made that arrangement in San Diego, but this is a county by county thing to make sure, because this postage mark, it makes a difference as where that ballot's countable. And it is up to them to make sure it is date stamped. So please push your registrar and work with your registrar. Even go and talk to your postmaster at your local post office and say, has this been brought up to you? Are you going to do it? What are the issues? Again, public involvement is going to make this difference here, county by county. And the third part of the law is it doesn't limit in-person voting opportunities. Again, I will repeat, you don't have to use the ballot that's mailed to you, because every county will have in-person opportunities. In some counties, they may not be quite as easy as it has been in the past, but in your county, it pretty much will be. So, for vote centers, you're used to those vote centers, or at least you've used them once, maybe more than that. One question to ask you, and Wendy or Jan, let me know if you already know the answer to this. Are yours going to be open the full 11 days, or are they going to limit it to 4 days of being open? Do you know? Not hearing an answer right now, but maybe we will later.
We actually know it's going to be 4 days. It's just going to be 4 days. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And that's, again, a county decision. SB 423 allowed the vote center counties to limit their vote center openings to be only 4 days instead of the full 11 days that they normally are. So in your county, then we have the answer. 4 days only to go and vote in person, starting on Halloween. There's first day. Dress up in your Halloween costume and go vote on that first day. At a vote center, as you're aware, but too many people in these vote center counties still haven't got all the information. They're still confused. You can get a replacement ballot if your ballot never came, although by that time it's way too late to have done that. You need to get your replacement well in advance of this time. You can register to vote, but if you need a replacement ballot because you messed yours up, you know, your dog ate it, or you lined the bird cage with it, or you marked it inaccurately, you can get a replacement ballot. But when you're there, don't get a replacement ballot, just vote in person. You can register to vote if you're not registered and the last minute you decide you want to vote. You can do that same day registration there. You can drop off your vote by mail ballot there if you want to, but as long as you're there, don't drop it off. Vote in person. There's no surrender of that ballot necessary. And the reason is that each vote center is going to have what they call an electronic poll book, and it is connected directly to your registrar's office, and they have a real-time way of looking at your voter history. So if you go in to vote in person, the first thing they'll do is check your voter history and see whether the registrar's office has received a vote by mail ballot in your name. That keeps you from dying. If they say, no, we haven't gotten your ballot, it has not been sent in, they will immediately cancel that ballot. That ballot has a barcode outside of it, the envelope, and they will cancel that barcode so that when your ballot, if your ballot were to arrive and it gets wanded, it will show up as a duplicate because you've already voted in person, and it will be set aside and not counted. So that keeps you from double voting. And then you will be able to cast an in-person ballot in your vote center, and that is the safest thing you can do. So that is what we recommend. If you feel comfortable going out in public to vote, ask you to do it. If you feel that there's a threat to your health and you don't feel comfortable doing it, then you do have the luxury of that vote by mail ballot to use. And I would also like us to get another vocabulary lesson, if you will. Stop calling them absentee ballots. California has not had an absentee ballot since 1998. An absentee ballot is one that you fill out an application for, you meet the qualifications to get one, it is tracked and it is secure. We don't have that anymore in California. We have anybody who wants one just has to pick up a phone and ask for it, with no ID required, no application, no way of following that ballot. And in the case of the vote center counties now, everybody gets one whether they want one or not. In the case of this particular election, everybody in every county gets one whether they want one or not. They are uncontrolled. We don't know how many of those are going to voters that aren't there anymore. There's a huge difference between generally voting by mail and voting absentee. So try not to call these absentee ballots in California. They are anything but. Absentee ballots are much more secure and protected and tracked. The free-for-all vote by mail is a real threat to election integrity. There's a big difference. So let's get to citizen oversight. We talked a little bit about overseeing the legislative process, but in the electoral process, it's really important. It isn't the be all and end all. It's not going to completely put anything that can go wrong, but it makes an enormous difference. And that's what I need people to understand. I know it's easy to be skeptical, but it really makes a difference. We want observers for the vote centers. And make this very, very clear. We don't observe. We can write down what happened and then do a report afterwards and say, oh, this is everything that went wrong. The major purpose for our observation is to stop things that are going wrong at the moment that they're going wrong and fix them right then and there so that votes are not threatened. That's important. Yes, we collected documentation.
Seems that we've lost Ruth. Hope that she dials back in here. Let her know. Stay tuned.
Yeah, I was going to answer the question. This is Zoom. And and Rolf, thank you for letting us know that we are now ruthless. Okay.
You're such a comedian.
And
we do need to get more ruthless, though.
I'm sure that
back.
She's back.
She's back, yay.
Oh, we're back. We're glad you're back, Ruth.
All of a sudden I had a little note that said I'm reconnecting. So I apologize why this went out. I don't know. Technology, right? So I was trying to say that in ballot processing, your ballots that are coming in vote by mail, which still the majority of them will, have to go through hundreds of hands. Lots can happen to them. And one of the things that can happen is in the duplicating process. If anything happens to your ballot while you're filling it out, if you drip some coffee on it, or you make a stray mark, or anything like that you might not think is a problem, or if it gets bent or crumpled somehow in the mailing process or the handling process, the machine can't read that. So they have to copy your ballot over, and the ballot that you so carefully marked is not the one that gets counted in your name. We need to be there with our big eyeballs, making sure that when they copy these ballots over, and there are more than you would think that get copied over, that they're copied over exactly the way that you made them out, rather than getting manipulated in the process. All of that is why we have to be in those ballot processing centers watching what's happening. This is a big ask because this is a long period of time. This is 60 days potentially. So we train people, and then we put a schedule together based on when those people say they're available to go. And we try to make sure we have a steady stream of people going through those centers and watching the ballots getting counted. So we definitely need your help there. Somebody tell me that I'm still being heard, please.
You're good. We've got you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. All right, observer training. You can't do this observation very effectively until you know what to look for and what to do when you see it. And that's what our training is all about. We're not doing any in-person training this season because we want to protect our liability in the COVID environment. So it will all be by Zoom, just like we're doing today. That's going to make it easier for you to access a training that will be to the day and the time of your liking. We are going to notify you by email, so it's important that you be on our email list. Go to EIP-Ca.com and sign up to be on our email list if you are not already on it. And if you haven't received anything from us in the last few days, you're not on the list. So please go and get back on it if you've been dropped for some reason. And we're going to send out a notification about these trainings and show you how to RSVP. On September 1st or so is when we're going to send our first one out. The first round of training is going to be the ballot processing training, because that starts October 5th. And we train you close to the time that you're going to be doing the job so that it's fresh in your mind. So October 5th is when we start observing the process, because that's when they start processing ballots. So we'll train you in the second half of September for that. RSVPs start the beginning of September. And you will want to receive that email so that you will have an easy way to RSVP and tell us you want to be trained. That training is pretty simple. It's about 90 minutes max, so it's not a lot of your time. So we really encourage you to train for that. Even if you are so busy that you can only go one day out of all those 60 days and you can only go for 2 hours on one day, you're valuable. We need you there. No amount of time is too small to help in this process. There will be a lot of different days, a lot of different times for both this training and also for the training to observe at the vote center. So you should be able to hop on to a training that works for you. If you observed with us in March, then you don't have to go through the whole big training again. You will. This is for the vote centers. For the ballot observing, we want everybody to go through that training again because a lot has changed. But for the March observers who were already trained, you just need a short review session that will introduce you to the changes that have been made in our procedures and in the procedures at the polls. So you will get an opportunity to sign up for a retrain if you are a veteran observer from March, so you don't have to slog through the whole thing. And I hope that that will encourage you as well. My final reminder to you is that you need to be responsible for where your ballot is at all times. Just like that big billboard campaign they had, it's 3 a.m. Do you know where your child is? It's October whatever. Do you know where your ballot is? Go to where's my ballot. That's all you have to type into the URL. You don't have to do the rest. Just type in where's my ballot and it'll take you straight to the website where you can really quickly, in about 30 seconds, sign up to track your ballot. You will get notifications when the ballot is in the mail to you. You will get notifications when it has been put in your mailbox. And that's really important. Even if you're not planning to use that ballot, you're going to do the right thing and vote in person, you still need to make sure your ballot doesn't fall into other hands. And so you need to keep track of it on its way to you. That's what this system will do. So that if they say your ballot's been delivered and it's not in your mailbox, you can alert your registrar immediately to cancel your ballot and send out a new one so that nobody can fraudulently use your ballot. Really important to track your ballot. So please do this immediately. Then if you do use that vote by mail ballot, you will also get alerts telling you that they've received it, that they have processed it, that it has been cleared to be counted. If for some reason that they're questioning your ballot, they will let you know that there's a reason for you to try to contact them and cure your ballot to allow them to vote it, to count it. So it's a really important system. This is a new system that was required by law to be set up. We don't have a lot of feedback on just how efficient it's going to be. Hopefully they have used the private sector to help them with this, because they never make a mistake with Amazon or some of these other places where you order by mail. The guy puts it on my porch and 2 seconds later I get a text message, your package has arrived. Well, this is the way it should work in letting you know about your ballots. Go to ballot tracks, which is where's my ballot, and sign up to do that. And now for questions that I have not had a chance to answer or didn't think to answer, I would love to field any questions you may be having. So what I'm going to do is stop my screen share. And then it's that way I can read chat and questions, and also you can you can monitor those questions yourself. So
I think your screen share actually stopped itself when we lost you on video, but
you weren't getting screen share after that?
no.
Oh, what a shame. What a shame. Well, anyway, it just helps people to see stuff while they're hearing it. So I'm sorry I didn't know that I was still not sharing, but okay. So there we go. Now I will take a look at the questions that you've given me and see if we get a ballot in the mail for previous resident. Oh, great question. And we're going to be sending that information out as one of our voter alerts. If you get a ballot in your mailbox that's not yours, addressed to your address, but it's not yours, or even worse, not addressed to your address, but somehow the mailman puts it in the wrong box, which happens to me about twice a week, you need to know what to do about that. And if it's not addressed to your address and you're kind enough to take it to the person it belongs to, great, or talk to your mail deliverer and say, hey, you misdelivered this, please give it to the right person. If a ballot comes to your mailbox that is addressed to your address and to someone who doesn't live there, we will have requests that you take a picture of it, that you fill out a citizen witness statement and get it to EIPCA, and then you contact your registrar and follow their instructions on what to do with that actual ballot. Don't vote it, please, that's illegal. If I send in my ballot and then decide to go to a vote center in person, they'll cancel my mail-in? No. Once they have received your ballot, that's it. They will not let you vote in person. So if you mail your ballot in and it's gotten there, then you can't vote in person anymore. But if you mail it today and then later today you go in and vote in person, then you can still vote in person because your ballot has not been received yet. They will cancel that ballot when it gets there. But you have to not have them have received your ballot in order to vote in person. Okay, another
Ron,
question.
did you have a question you wanted to pose?
I have one from the chat.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I have a comment, a request and a question. I'll do them both. The request is that you post the website, the information about the trainings, or even post it here in the chat.
Right
and
now?
The question is, where are the processing centers? I think they mean the voter centers where you can go and vote in person.
Okay, those are your vote centers.
Okay.
And so your website, your registrar's website should give the locations of all of your vote centers. And when you receive your vote by mail ballot, that information, all of those addresses will be in that information you receive. And then in your county, you can go to any one of those you want to. Doesn't have to be a specific one. Anyone that's closer to where you happen to be, you can go and vote in those centers. Big question that came up in the discussion before we actually formally started this meeting, and it's being repeated in the Q&A, is the outside of the ballots, are they going to be marked with what your party is? The big video that's going viral about a lady showing that there's a D and an R on the envelope and stuff, that is from the Florida primary. And as many of you were saying, the primary election, because it's a partisan election, most of the counties did mark whether you were Republican or Democrat on the outside of the ballot. I really don't see that that's legitimate. And we've talked with our registrar about that, and he's not ever going to do that again because there's no reason to do it. But it should not be indicated in the general election. And I say should not because, again, California is not cohesive in any way. And each registrar designs their own ballot, and they design their own envelope. So whether or not the party is indicated on the outside of your envelope will be a decision that your registrar will make or has made. So you will need to ask your registrar that specific question. In our county, is anybody who knows where to look, going to be able to tell from the envelope whether my ballot is a Democrat or a Republican voting it. And then let them know if they're planning to put an indication on the outside in any way, shape, or form, how much you oppose that. But my answer basically is probably not.
Is there any legitimate reason for having that on the outside of the envelope? Because
No,
it's in our county, it is. I had an REP right above my name.
Yeah, there is.
Question.
Yes, I know. And when I asked my registrar about it, he said, well, that information is posted at the polls and there's no real expectation of privacy in terms of the way that you've registered, because, it's obtainable by the public and whatever. So they were just kind of cavalier about it. And we said, what could possibly go wrong here? Come on, there's no reason. It doesn't help you to process that ballot to know what we are from the outside. So we really strongly object to it. He understood that, and he said, he wasn't going to do that again. You'll have to negotiate that with your registrar, county by county. But there should be no excuse for that to be happening in the general election. So just call your registrar and see what he or she has to say about that.
That's sad.
You're asking about surrender. The only counties that have to surrender their ballot in order to vote in person are the counties that are going to retain their traditional neighborhood polling centers or polling places. Those are the only counties where a surrender will be necessary. And so for Monterey, I don't have that all in my head what Monterey is going to be doing. But if you're going to retain your traditional places, in fact, we just sent out an email a couple of days ago to our people that were signed up to receive our emails, and there was a document attached to it that tells you which counties are doing what. And so if you go back to that document, you'll be able to see. And if your county is doing anything other than the traditional down the street neighborhood polling place, you don't have to surrender your ballot in order to vote in person. Okay? Other questions?
Ruth, there's a couple that I see regarding someone fraudulently votes your mail-in ballot, and then what happens when you go to the voting center to vote in person?
You're basically out of luck.
Yeah.
The bottom line. Some counties like Los Angeles says, well, we'll have you vote provisionally and we'll count both of them. We go, what? And the answer that was given in LA is, well, since we have no way of knowing which ballot was cast by the right voter, we'll count them both, which of course is totally illegal. But the bottom line is the law says if you have cast a ballot and it's been accepted, then a second ballot will not be counted in your name, even if that first one turns out to be fraudulent. So if someone fraudulently votes in your name, you're out of luck, which is why you need to protect your ballot and then kind of go on one of the first days that your vote centers are open to vote, so that doesn't happen to you. I have another question about providing phone numbers. You provide your phone number if you want to. If you choose not to, it just gives them one fewer way to get in touch with you if there's a problem with your ballot. And so, I encourage it. They're not going to call you unless there's a problem that they need you to resolve. And so I don't see a downside to that, but you don't have to provide it if you don't want to. We're talking about duplicate registrations, which we do have in California to the tune of like 24,000 the last time we looked. And if they don't resolve those duplicates, then those people will receive 2 ballots and can potentially vote both of them. If you get a duplicate, again, we want you to take a photograph. We want you to report that officially to EIPCA, and then we want you to call the registrar and ask them what you should do with the extra ballot. Your signature is on the outside of the envelope, yes, because they're not allowed to open the envelope until they have cleared your signature. So yes, your signature is out there for God and everybody to see, and that's another thing that people are upset about, but that's California law. Okay, I'm looking at the Q&A, I'm not looking at the chat, so some of you can help me with what's in the chat.
There's nothing in the chat right now.
Okay.
One more here in the Q&A from Denise about the VoteCal. Is it used in all the voting centers, and is it used consistently?
VoteCal is used in the vote centers. It is right now the major use for VoteCal, which is disturbing because VoteCal is not reliable. So it should not be used this way. But if someone comes into a vote center and they are not currently registered and they want to register and vote the same day, the latest law that was passed just before the March election allows a person to register, and if their county is connected to VoteCal, which yours would be, and when they type your name into VoteCal says, yep, you're good to go, without any other checks to see whether you're really a resident of where you say you are, no check to see if you're a citizen, no checks whatsoever. They will then provide you a ballot that will not be conditional or provisional, and you can vote on a same-day ballot at the moment of registration. I find that terribly disturbing given the condition of VoteCal, but that's basically what it's used for in your vote centers.
If I can jump in with a question, what are our rights in terms of watching the operations that are going on in the post office, in those semis that SEIU uses to drive ballots back and forth on election night? Do we have any rights in terms of observers to go and watch what they're doing there?
Well, I will tell you that the discussion you were having about private cars and stuff like that's the first time I've heard of that happening. But I guess
$75 a trip.
The registrars are really stretched thin right now. You have to kind of feel sorry for them. They're trying to find polling locations that can accommodate social distancing and all that kind of stuff, making it very difficult. And then they're also having to have poll workers from a very shrinking set of volunteers, because so many of the poll workers tend to be the older individuals who won't feel quite as comfortable being out in public and subjecting themselves. So they're going to have a hard time recruiting. Plus, when you went to a vote center, you now have a longer period of training and a longer period of service. It's not just a 2-hour training and a 1-day thing anymore. So it's harder to get people who have that kind of disposable time. And my registrar said that about 40% of our poll workers tend to be those that are there in the student program. And the 16 and 17-year-olds, and they're not going to be available this time because their schools aren't open to recruit them. So it's difficult for these people. So I think they're trying to fill in the holes as best they can, and this is the solution that your county's come up with. I'm not comfortable with it. Hopefully these people will be fully vetted, and they will be bonded, and that they will at least have a 2-person chain of custody. But who knows? I mean, I think I can see a lot of things that would go wrong. Someone has asked me to comment on the comment that Mrs. Clinton said about that Biden should not concede, but he should wait until he wins as long as it takes. I think you do know what she means. I think it's looking at the Al Franken situation all over again. That because of the chaos in that election and the fact that his opponent would not concede, they continued to find boxes floating in the lake and locked in somebody's garage and out of somebody's trunk. Then they took those ballots and they counted them until they finally had Franken ahead of his opponent. His opponent ran out of time to fight, and he thought it was really threatening the democratic process to continue to battle down this line. What Mrs. Clinton is calling for is a constitutional crisis. She is calling for us to not have an election result in a legitimate period of time and have a peaceful transition of power, however that will look. And that's a constitutional crisis. It is subversive, and I'm appalled that she would say such a thing. There you go.
Then Al Franken took himself out with an unforced error. Karma.
Yes, wasn't that funny? Well deserved.
Phyllis, are you seeing anything else there? Or Ron?
Oh, wait a minute. I've got 2 new messages. Let me look.
While she's looking, I have a question, Ruth, for you, and it's not what you've covered, but with ballot harvesting and mail-in voting, obviously ripe for fraud and other abuses, is there anything we can do as individuals to minimize the effects of vote harvesting, other than voting ourselves in person? But
Well, I believe, first of all, that it's very important that we all take the responsibility to be part of the education train. We need to let everybody we know understand the dangers of just blithely turning their ballot over to someone rather than keeping responsibility for our own ballot. Some people are very naive, they're very gullible. The fraudsters in every element of society are successful every single day because those people who are nice people believe that everybody else is a nice person too. And we need to create a little bit of skepticism in the minds of people who otherwise might say, oh, what a nice young man. He offered to take my ballot in for me. That's wonderful. And just give it over to them. So if you will continue to publicize loudly every way you can the dangers of turning your ballot over to a ballot harvester you don't know, a ballot harvester you have no reason to trust. I know that there are conservative groups now that are protecting themselves basically by also ballot harvesting to kind of counteract the other side. And, you know, we don't condone ballot harvesting because we think it's wrong at a very basic level, but we understand why you need to do it. So if you do it, make sure that you really appear above board and super careful to be giving receipts and have sealed boxes and give people a sense of security that you're going to do the right thing with their ballot. But even at that, if you don't know the people you're surrendering your ballot to, you shouldn't do it. So spread the word. That's the first thing I would do to protect that. Other than that, you know, keep your eyes and ears open. And if anybody reports that somebody came to their door or somebody comes to your door, and if there's anything untoward about what they're doing, if they're trying to strong arm or offer to come in and help you fill out your ballot kind of thing, you know, be skeptical of that and report it right away, because that part is not legal. And the legalization of harvesting, it acts as a cover for a lot of illegal activity that happens underneath that. I got a question here in the chat that says something about, do we train in other languages? No, we do not. In California, the law is very clear that in order to work the polls, you have to be a US citizen, or, well, now you can be a non-citizen, but you have to be fluent and literate in English. So we think the same thing should be required of our observers, that you have to be fluent and literate in English. And it's just a matter of bandwidth. We did at one point translate all of our materials into Spanish. I did it, and it took me a long time to get it done correctly, but we then elected not to do that simply because, you know, the bottom line is that everything about poll working and poll observing should be in the language that's used there. Somebody's asking about Nancy Pelosi becoming president. The law says that if we do not have a declared winner by the date, the inauguration day, which would be January 20th, Trump and Pence are out of office. If there is no one to take that office lawfully yet, then it goes to the Speaker of the House to be acting president until such time as we have electoral results. If the House stays in the hands of the Democrats, yes, that will be Nancy Pelosi. If the House flips, then whoever the House has elected to be the Republican Speaker of the House would become the acting president until such time as we get our results. We really have to hope that that doesn't happen, because that is an enormous constitutional crisis there. And we don't ever want our country to be that insecure. That's why we have the system that we have, so that we have peaceful transition of power, and then everybody moves on from there. And if we don't have that this time, it's going to be a real disaster. So we just have to pray that things will happen.
I shudder to imagine what her first executive orders would be. That is a scary thought.
You would have to hope that she would understand that she was an acting president and she really should not rock any boats. But, you know, you don't know. That may be an opportunistic time and could create a lot of damage. We just don't know what could possibly happen. So we just have to hope that doesn't become the issue. Is there an organized effort to meet with voters in nursing homes? Yes, there actually is. We have an effort, but other efforts as well, to try to educate the families of people who have loved ones in nursing homes and other such assisted living facilities, and also to educate the staff that works at those facilities, to let them know that a lot of things that they've been allowing to happen are really not lawful. And in some of them, they will take the ballots and they withhold them from the residents rather than delivering their mail, so they can all meet together and all talk it over together and all vote together. And they think that's doing them a service when it's really mail fraud. There are other organizations that allow outside groups like the League of Women Voters or whatever to come in and have these sessions and help people mark their ballots. That again is completely illegal, and it's partisan, and it's everything that shouldn't happen. And a lot of times these people don't know better, and they just think they're helping their people when actually they are incentivizing vote fraud, so to speak. So we are doing our best to make sure that these organizations get informed that what they can do, what they cannot do, what how to help their residents. And then we also know that other groups are trying to do the same. It's a big job, and we continue to work on that, of course.
There's a question in the chat that you may have answered when you talked about harvesting, but the question is that some ethnic churches want to do ballot harvesting to make sure their votes count. What do you think, and how do we report it?
How do you report it? A lot of churches are deciding to do ballot harvesting because the vote percentage of especially evangelical Christians is very low usually, and they realize that that's going to make a big difference if they can get evangelicals to vote. So these groups of people are trying to make it as easy as possible for these people to vote and say, just bring your ballot to church, we'll collect it, we'll turn it in for you. Again, I'm not going to fault somebody for that, because obviously the other side is doing it and you've got to fight fire with fire, but we don't condone ballot harvesting by anybody, because I don't think there's a right way to do the wrong thing, and I think harvesting is the wrong thing. But I don't blame anybody for wanting to do it right now, because you've got to fight for your life, and right now that's the way to do it. Somebody wants to know a couple of things. What's the process if the mail-in ballot's not signed? We now have a curing process for California. So if your ballot is not signed, or they don't like your signature and they're not matching it, or if there's some other problem with your ballot, they won't just throw it out. They will contact you as a voter. They will tell you what's wrong. They will ask you to verify that, yes, indeed, that is my ballot. I did sign it, or I meant to sign it, or whatever. And you can then cure that ballot. And you have up till 3 days before, what do they call it, certification, to cure your ballot and get it signed. The problem with that system, of course, is that they usually notify you by mail. And a lot of people get the little postcard and they don't see it in the stack of their mail, or they don't think they don't read it. So a lot of the cure notices never come back. And so we still get ballots thrown out because people neglected to cure. And that's another reason to have your phone number on file with them. Because if they don't hear back from you, then they will contact you by phone and remind you that your ballot is in jeopardy. And if you want it to count, you need to cure it. So you want to make sure they can contact you. And I think it's a good idea for them to have your email address and to have your phone number. Somebody,
we can probably take one more question, Ruth, because we're at our end time here. So probably this is the last question.
I think I've got a good one. It's not a question, but it's from James. He said he was on 3 calls with Ruth to Sacramento, and he's complimenting her on the great job she did presenting. You made me proud of our side, and thank you for your activism and your obvious knowledge and competence.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The question about mail-in ballot boxes have stock blank envelopes available. That's very legitimate, because the ballot has to arrive in a vote by mail ballot envelope. And if you have lost your envelope or messed it up in some way, there's nothing wrong with your obtaining a new envelope in which to put your vote by mail ballot. That's perfectly good that they provide that for you. And
it probably doesn't have the REP on the outside.
No, obviously that one won't be identified.
Yeah.
And this question of voting early, that's really scary. If you vote early, then you might be subject to, voter's remorse when you get the October surprise. Because even though we all believe, I know exactly how I'm voting on every proposition and all the way down the line, there's something that you could learn later on that might change that your mind on that. And so we don't encourage you to vote overly early. and understand that when you vote, but when you can start voting October 5th in person by walking into the registrar's office, but then that becomes an in-person vote by mail. It's a big mess. I think that now that you've got either 11 days or 4 days before election day to vote, by then that's not super early. What now, but normally it's 11. I don't think that's super early. I think by then, yeah, you should have your mind made up. And the benefit to you if you go on one of the earlier days is you're not going to find any lines and any crowds, because most people still have that election day in their head. And those vote centers are just jam-packed on election day, not only with people voting in person, but people just going to drop their ballot off there. So you avoid those crowds by going on one of the previous days and voting early.
Now, before Jen closes the meeting off, can you go over the dates one more time for us for the election integrity effort?
The dates for our okay.
So,
I'm not going to give you the full dates of all the dates that we're training. We did send that out though in one of our letters, and if you have that, want to forward it to people, you can. But on September 1st, it is our plan to send out the RSVP with all the dates for training for ballot processing observation. And on September 28th, that is the date I have scheduled to send out the RSVP and the dates for training to observe at the vote centers. So those are the key dates to be looking for. I know some of you want them earlier than that, which is why I sent out that original one that said, this is like a save the date that you get for people that are going to get married. This is not an invitation to our wedding yet. It's just a save the date. And I did send that out, and you might want to try to share that, Wendy, with people. But the actual RSVPs will be taken when we send out the official invitation.
okay, thank you.
And I think, I'm sure Wendy we'll be sending out messages to our email list and letting them know who we need and what the process is, and get people involved. So if you're on our email list, you'll hear. So don't worry about that. The only comment I have is, hey, thank God for COVID, because these people cannot go into the nursing homes and harvest ballots.
Well, there have been some silver linings to that cloud, that's for sure, and that's one of them. I don't know how much time you have, but there were a couple of other Q&As that I don't want people to feel that they've been ignored. How can they determine a winner prior to 17 days after election day, since ballots can come in up to that time? They do that because of projections that they can make based on past formula and stuff like that. Plus, we don't anticipate a huge flood of ballots coming in past the third day after election day. If there is a flood coming in, there's something really wrong. What percentage?
People don't understand that the election is certified. I mean, that they have to certify the election, 30 or 60 days?
30 days after.
30 days.
They can call winners, but that doesn't mean they can't then change that within that 30-day period of time, like they did in Orange County in 2018. They had declared several people winners that then after they counted all of the harvested ballots, they had to call that back and say, no, we were wrong. So they can call something, but that's not an official win until it's certified. I don't know the percentages of CVR and provisional ballots. I've tried to get those, and I've got that question out there. It's been out there 5-6 months, and I haven't gotten an answer to that yet. I keep getting put off, so I don't know. There has been progress made in the LA County cleaning their rolls, just not enough. And as I said earlier, some of those people that got removed, it appears that they've migrated back on. So you have to be careful to follow them and not trust them. But some progress has been made, just not nearly as much as should have been. There is no validation done anywhere for citizenship. Honor system is it. Not when you register, not when you vote, not when they clean the rolls, nothing. There is no citizenship validation other than you check the box and say, I'm a citizen, and that's the end of it.
That is so wrong. That is just awful.
And what happens if the election result is unclear? Wow, we're in such crazy territory there. I think there is a constitutional element that I think that the House of Representatives would be the ultimate decider. But, you know, we need to pull out our constitutions if we're concerned about that and say what ultimately down the line would be the final decider. And it's scary. And we really hope it doesn't come to that. Just really have to hope it doesn't come to that.
Amen. Well, are we,
There's one more question in the chat about how do homeless people vote?
Homeless people are registered at any address they wish to give. So they can give an address of the shelter they hang out at, or a street corner, an intersection where they tend to hang out. They can register anywhere they choose to. If they tend to hang out in front of your house, they could register at your address for that matter. But they do have to provide a mailing address, which I assume is general delivery. And it's difficult with an all vote by mail thing. That's a population that will likely be adversely affected and disenfranchised because of the difficulty, A, of their being able to get a ballot in the first place, and B, being able to travel the extra distance to a vote center as opposed to a local neighborhood polling place. So I'm sure that there are groups out there that are going to be helping those individuals with their voting problems, but that's the law with them. Something about the tabulator with early voting, when are the in-person votes actually counted? This new law that was just passed that I referenced, SB 423, also gives the registrars now the right to actually send ballots through the tabulator starting 29 days before election day. Normally that's only 7 days before election day. But all votes cast and or counted prior to election day at 8 p.m. are kept inside the machine, and no one can see the results that are in there. So they're tabulated, but no one can see what that tabulation is. No one knows how it's going. And then at 8 p.m. on election night, they push a button and all those numbers come out. And those are the first election results you see on your TV. All of the ballots that were able to be processed and counted prior to election day. And then as the night proceeds, you're getting the ballots that are coming in from same day in-person voting. And then as the weeks go on, you start to get the rest of the vote by mail ballots tabulated in there. If I have missed any of your questions, I really apologize. I'm not intending to fail to answer anything you want to know. What is the recourse? What if the recourse if Republicans win on election night and then magically a bunch of ballots with no chain of custody are found that flips the results like in Orange County? There's no recourse because it's legal for those ballots to be turned in unaccounted for and without chain of custody. That's the damage that that law did. So there is no recourse except for us to keep our eyes and ears really open, make sure more people are aware of the ballot harvesting problem. And a lot of people believe that ballot harvesting on the other side is also a way to counter that. But the damage is done at this point until we can overturn that law. So I don't see any other questions, Pierre. So,
well, thank you so much, Ruth. This was extremely informative, and hopefully we've perked the interest of additional folks who will want to help in observing at the vote centers and at the registrar of voters office. And little by little, we'll build a bigger team to do that. So
I hope so. You know, from your mouth to God's ears, we need everybody involved. Even if you have just a little bit of time to spare, we have got to have that citizen oversight. It will make an enormous difference. So thank you for plugging it. Thank you for Wendy and Jan to kind of being the spearhead up there to help us build that team and to do that. And I just look forward to seeing all of you on a Zoom call and a training.
Great. Thanks so much, Ruth. And thank you all our participants. We really appreciate it. And thanks to our panelists, Phyllis Vogel and Ron Swenson for helping us out today. We really appreciate it. And tell your friends if they missed it, we'll have it online available to them as soon as we can. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now,
Bye-bye.